She sat quietly in seat 14A, close to the window with her hands folded in her lap. Most passengers didn't even notice her when they boarded. She looked like someone who preferred silence over attention, someone who only spoke when needed. The plane was half full, and the crew was preparing for takeoff. People were talking, laughing, scrolling on their phones, but she was just watching the clouds outside, waiting for the flight to lift off. No one knew anything about her. She wasn't trying to hide, yet she lived in her own small world. Her backpack was under the seat. Her seatbelt was already fastened. She didn't even look nervous. She just seemed tired, like someone who had carried too many worries for too long. The flight took off smoothly. The engines roared, the cabin shook a little, and the aircraft climbed into the sky. The quiet girl didn't move, didn't react, didn't even smile. She simply looked outside at the fading city lights below. The person sitting beside her noticed how calm she was. Most passengers hold their breath during takeoff, but she didn't. She had a strange stillness, like she had experienced this many times before. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Drinks were served, people chatted, some slept, some watched movies. The quiet girl kept her headphones on, but there was no sound leaking from them. Maybe she wasn't even listening to anything. Maybe she just wanted to avoid conversations. But then, something changed. Around mid-flight, the seatbelt sign turned on unexpectedly. The crew looked confused. The plane wasn't shaking, and there was no turbulence. Still, the sign stayed lit. The quiet girl removed her headphones and looked around. Something felt wrong. It wasn't the kind of warning that came from weather. It felt like a human warning. Like someone had pressed the button in a hurry. A few seconds later, the main door of the cockpit opened slightly. A crew member slipped. Inside, the quiet girl didn't take her eyes off the door. She watched closely. The crew member didn't come back out. Then the announcement came, not the normal calm voice. Not the usual, "Ladies and gentlemen." This time, it was shaky. Is there anyone here with medical experience? Please ring the call button immediately. Passengers turned their heads. Some gasped, some whispered nervously. A few pressed their call buttons. The quiet girl didn't move. She just stared at the cockpit door, like she already knew what happened. The crew rushed down the aisle, asking row by row. Nobody knew how serious it was. Until someone near the front said loudly, "I think the pilot fainted." The cabin froze. The word pilot hit everyone like ice water. People lifted their heads. A child started crying. An elderly man grabbed his armrest. The flight attendants looked pale. The cockpit door opened again for a second, and the quiet girl caught a glimpse inside. Someone was lying on the floor. Someone else was trying to check his pulse. The co-pilot was still in his seat, speaking into the radio with a tense voice. She inhaled slowly. She knew that look. She knew that type of emergency, but she stayed still. She didn't want to draw attention. She didn't want people staring at her. She had promised herself that she would stay out of everything today. She just wanted a normal flight, a quiet journey, nothing more. But fate had other plans. Suddenly, a loud, sharp sound cut through the entire aircraft. Beep, 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 beep. The radio inside the cockpits screamed something that made every hair on her body stand up. Mayday. Mayday, do you copy? The voice wasn't from their cockpit. It was from the ground. And it sounded urgent. Passengers heard it too. The co-pilot's reply was shaky, almost breaking. "This is Flight 719. Captain is unresponsive." I repeat, "Captain is unresponsive." People panicked. A woman covered her mouth. A man stood up before being told to sit down. The plane wasn't falling, but fear spread faster than turbulence ever could. The quiet girl closed her eyes for one short moment. She didn't want this. She didn't want to step into this kind of situation again. But the radio kept screaming, "Mayday! Mayday! Any qualified personnel on board? Respond immediately." A crew member ran down the aisle, clearly overwhelmed. Her hands were shaking. She asked loudly, "Is anyone here who can help? Please, this is urgent." Nobody answered, nobody except the quiet girl, who finally unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. Her neighbor looked at her, surprised. Are you going to help them?" She didn't reply. She didn't want praise. She didn't want eyes on her. She only whispered, almost to herself, "They need someone." She stood up, steady and calm, even while others were trembling. Her steps were quiet, but every pair of eyes followed her as she walked down the aisle. The crew ran toward her the moment they saw her standing. "Do you have medical experience?" the attendant asked. She didn't blink. "Not medical," she said softly. "Something else." The attendant looked confused. Then, "What can you do?" The quiet girl looked toward the cockpit, and in a voice that didn't match her gentle appearance, she said, "I can keep the plane steady." The attendant froze. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The quiet girl took a slow breath. She had tried to avoid this part of her life. She had tried to stay hidden. But now, all the passengers were depending on someone who could help. "I used to fly," she whispered. The radio crackled again. "Mayday. Do we have anyone who can assist?" The quiet girl stepped forward, and the entire plane watched the silent passenger from seat 14, a walk toward the cockpit. With a confidence nobody had seen in her until now. The moment she entered the cockpit, the noise around her faded. Outside, passengers were whispering, crying softly, gripping their armrests, but inside, it felt like another world. The air was tense. One pilot was lying on the floor, eyes closed, breathing shallow. The co-pilot was struggling to keep his hands steady on the controls. The radio kept crackling with voices from the ground. She stood still for a second, taking everything in. The co-pilot looked at her in surprise. She didn't look like someone who belonged here. No uniform, no badge, just a calm girl with quiet eyes. But something in her face made him pause. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice tight. "I can help," she said gently. The co-pilot swallowed hard. "Do you have flying experience?" She nodded once. "Enough to keep us steady." There was no time to question her. The plane was already drifting slightly to the left. The co-pilot looked at her, unsure, but desperation made the decision for him. He slid his chair back. "Okay. Take the right controls," he said. She moved closer, sat down, and placed her hands on the yoke, her fingers calm and steady. The memories came back instantly. Old training sessions, long nights spent in simulators, the sound of engines she knew better than her own heartbeat. She had walked away from all of it years ago, but the skills never left her. The co-pilot watched her carefully. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't want to reveal anything more than needed. "Just call me 14A, she said softly, almost with a small smile. He blinked in confusion but didn't push. Ground control spoke again through the radio. "Flight 719, we need confirmation. Do you have a trained individual assisting?" The co-pilot glanced at her. She gave the slightest nod. "Yes," he answered. "Passenger assisting, previous flight experience." There was a pause on the radio, then a calmer voice replied, "Copy that. Keep altitude steady at current level. We're monitoring." She adjusted the aircraft gently. The movement was so smooth, the co-pilot stared at her like she was some kind of quiet miracle. Even the plane seemed to relax. "You've done this before," he said softly. She kept her eyes forward. "A long time ago." The attendants came to the cockpit door, looking scared. "Is everything under control?" one asked. "For now," she answered without looking back. Passengers in the front rows had seen her enter the cockpit. They were whispering things like, "Who is she? And how does she know what to do?" Even the children stopped crying for a moment, watching the door with wide eyes. The co-pilot pulled out a small oxygen mask and placed it on the unconscious captain. "His pulse is weak but present," he said. "I don't know what happened. One moment he was fine, then he just collapsed." She didn't react. She had seen things like this before. Fatigue, stress, hidden health problems. Many things could bring a pilot down suddenly. "We need to land soon," she said softly. "We can't," the co-pilot replied. "We're far from any major airport. And the weather ahead isn't clear." She stayed calm. "Then we keep the plane stable until we reach safe airspace." The co-pilot nodded. Okay. I'm with you." For a moment, the cockpit fell quiet except for the steady hum of the engines. The quiet girl from seat 14 slowly adjusted the altitude. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed slow. But inside, she wasn't as calm as she looked. She never wanted to fly again, not after the past she carried. She had promised herself she would never return to anything involving controls, engines, or skies. But now, dozens of people were depending on her. She couldn't walk away. Ground control called again. "Flight 719, we show minor drift on your left wing." "I see it," she replied before the co-pilot could answer. The radio fell silent. For a second, even the controllers on the ground seemed surprised by her steady voice. "You're doing well," ground control answered. "Continue adjustments." The co-pilot looked at her like he wanted to ask 100 questions, but he stayed quiet. He could feel she was carrying something heavy, something painful, something from a past she didn't want to open. She kept her eyes on the horizon. Then the plane jolted. Not from turbulence, something else. Something deeper. The co-pilot checked the screens. Pressure drop in the left cabin section. Why now? Passengers gasped in the cabin. A baby started crying loudly. Someone stood up before attendants told them to sit down. She tightened her grip on the controls. "It's okay. It's minor. Make an announcement. Calm them." He nodded and grabbed the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. Everything is under control." But the attendants could feel something different. They exchanged worried looks. They trusted her, but they didn't understand how a quiet passenger suddenly became the most important person on the plane. She breathed deeply and whispered to herself, "Not again. Please, not again." But whatever she hoped to avoid was already happening. The danger wasn't over. It was only beginning. The quiet girl from seat 14A held the controls firmly as the plane shuddered for a second time. This time it wasn't a soft shake. It felt deeper, more serious. She glanced at the co-pilot, who was already scanning the screens in panic. Some warning lights had begun to blink in orange. Not red, thank God, but still not normal. She kept her voice calm. "Tell me what you see." He swallowed. "Pressure imbalance. But the system isn't showing the cause." She nodded slowly. "Then we stay steady and wait for ground control to guide us." Her calmness didn't come from confidence. It came from experience, the kind she wished she didn't have. Outside the cockpit, passengers sensed something was wrong. They weren't screaming, but the fear was spreading quietly, the same way she herself once lived, silent but strong. A man held his wife's hand. A woman wiped her eyes. A young boy kept asking his mother if they were safe, and she kept saying yes, even though her voice trembled each time. Inside the cockpit, she took a small breath and adjusted the altitude again. The plane responded like it trusted her. The co-pilot noticed. He leaned back slightly, letting her work. "You fly like someone who trained for years," he said softly. "But why did you stop?" She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the sky ahead. Stories like hers didn't belong to strangers or mid-air confessions. They belonged to the hardest parts of her life. Parts she wanted to keep locked away. Ground control came through the radio again. "Flight 719, we're tracking the pressure issue. Maintain your current speed." Weather ahead shows light turbulence. She replied, "Copy that." Her voice was steady, but inside her chest, something tightened. She had flown through turbulence many times before, but today felt different. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't part of a crew. She wasn't prepared. She was just a quiet girl who wanted peace and ended up holding a plane full of lives in her hands again. The plane dipped slightly as the first wave of turbulence hit. She reacted instantly, lifting the nose and adjusting the balance. The co-pilot stared at her amazed. Most inexperienced flyers would overcorrect or panic, but she moved with precision, like she could feel the air itself shifting. Passengers grabbed their armrests. A few cried out softly. The cabin lights flickered for a second. She whispered under her breath, "Stay calm. Stay with me." It was unclear whether she was talking to the plane or to herself. The turbulence grew rougher. The plane swayed left, then right. A food tray slid off a counter at the back. A crew member quickly grabbed a handrail to keep her balanced. The co-pilot checked the radar. "We're in the edge of the storm. We can't avoid it unless we climb." She shook her head. "No, climbing with pressure imbalance is risky. We stay here." He exhaled sharply. "Then we ride through it?" She nodded. "Yes, slowly. Don't fight the air, move with it." The plane jerked again. A few passengers screamed this time. But the girl from 14A didn't flinch. Her hands didn't leave the controls, not even for a second. Every movement she made was small but meaningful. The co-pilot kept glancing at her like he wanted to ask the same question again. "Who are you?" But before he could speak, ground control returned on the radio. "Flight 719 weather ahead is clearing in approximately 10 minutes. Maintain current altitude." "Copy," she said. As the turbulence softened, she finally breathed. The co-pilot leaned forward, wiping sweat from his forehead. That could have been worse." She nodded. "It's not over yet." He looked at her in surprise. "Why do you say that?" She didn't answer immediately. She tapped a screen lightly. "Look here." He leaned in, and his face turned pale. The fuel indicator was dropping faster than it should. "What?" "That can't be right. We had enough for the entire route." She spoke quietly but firmly. "Something is leaking." The co-pilot's breath caught. "Fuel leak? Here? Now?" Her jaw tightened. "If we don't land soon, we won't have enough for another attempt." Passengers had no idea what danger now hovered around them. They only felt the plane stabilizing again, so some began to relax, thinking the worst was over. But the worst hadn't even started. The co-pilot whispered, "Why is all of this happening at once? First the captain, then the pressure. Now fuel?" She didn't reply. She stared straight ahead, watching the sky like it held answers. Deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. She had flown enough hours in her past life to recognize when something was just bad luck, and when something was very, very wrong. The quiet girl from seat 14 gripped the controls a little tighter. She didn't know what was waiting ahead, but she knew one thing clearly. This flight was not going to be easy, and she was the only one who could save them. The quiet girl from seat 14 kept her hands on the controls as the plane pushed forward through the calm that came after the turbulence. But even with the sky clearing, something inside her knew the real problem was still waiting. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fuel indicator. It kept dropping. Not dangerously fast yet, but fast enough to make her chest tighten. The co-pilot finally whispered what both of them feared. "If this keeps going, we won't make it to the destination." She didn't look at him. "Then we don't go to the destination." He stared at her. "You want to divert?" "We have to." He opened the navigation screen. "Nearest safe landing is still far. And with a leak, we may not reach it unless the wind favors us." She inhaled slowly. "Then we fly smart, step by step. Keep our movements gentle. No sudden climbs, no hard turns. Outside the cockpit, the passengers sensed the tension again. Even though the turbulence was gone, something felt wrong. The calm felt too quiet, like the moment before a storm begins again. People kept looking toward the cockpit door, hoping someone would come out and tell them everything was fine, but no one did. One of the attendants approached the cockpit. "Is there any update?" she asked softly. The co-pilot stepped out for a moment. "We're handling it. Please keep everyone calm. But should we prepare something?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Not yet," he replied. When he came back inside, the girl was running her fingers lightly along the dashboard, checking every reading. "You know these systems better than some trained pilots," he said. She didn't answer that. Instead, she pointed at a small blinking icon. "This is important. It tells us how the leak is affecting stability." He leaned closer, shocked. "How did you focus?" she cut in gently. The co-pilot nodded quickly. He could see she didn't want to explain her past. She wasn't here for attention or praise. She was here because the situation forced her to be. Another message came through the radio. "Flight 719, update your status. We see irregular fuel consumption." She answered before the co-pilot could. "Confirm fuel loss. Request nearest emergency landing option." Ground control paused for a moment. The pause made her stomach tighten. Then the reply came, "You are too far from major airports." "But we're checking alternatives." The co-pilot exhaled sharply. "This is not good." The girl looked at him, her expression calm but intense. "Panicking won't change anything." He nodded. Right. "Sorry." She gave the plane a slight left tilt to adjust course. It felt like she was moving a fragile glass in her hands, slow, gentle, precise. Then a sound echoed from the cabin, a sharp metallic thud. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make both pilots snap their heads up. "What was that?" the co-pilot whispered. The girl tightened her grip. Something shifted, maybe cargo, or something loose. Passengers felt it too. A few gasped. A child started crying again. The attendants quickly hurried down the aisle, telling everyone to stay calm. The girl looked at the co-pilot. "Check the stabilization, see if anything changed." He scanned the screen. Still okay. "But if something moved in the cargo hold, that can affect balance." She nodded. "I know." He looked at her carefully. "You seem to know everything." She didn't smile. "Not everything. Just enough to save us." Her eyes held a weight he couldn't name, like she had seen disasters before, and this one was waking old memories. Another call came through the radio. "Flight 719, we found a possible landing option. A small airstrip roughly 40 minutes ahead." The co-pilot blinked. 40 minutes? We might not have 40 minutes of fuel." The girl's voice stayed steady. "We fly smart. We stretch what we have." Ground control responded. "We will guide you. Wind speed is currently in your favor." She replied, "Good. Keep us updated." She adjusted the throttle slightly, just enough to reduce fuel burn without losing speed. It was a delicate balance. One wrong move, and the plane would dip too. Fast. Minutes passed slowly. The quiet girl didn't move her eyes from the horizon. Her mind was calculating constantly. Wind, speed, weight, distance, fuel, pressure. She had walked away from this world, but the world had pulled her back in the cruelest way. The co-pilot glanced at her again. "People are asking who you are," she spoke softly. "Just tell them I'm helping." "They want more than that," he said. She closed her eyes for a second. "I know." Then she opened them again and said something she never expected to say on this flight. "When we land safely, I'll tell you everything." The co-pilot didn't reply. He didn't want to think about what "when we land" meant. Because with every minute that passed, the fuel numbers kept dropping. Passengers had hope only because they didn't know the truth. But in the cockpit, The quiet girl from seat 14A and the co-pilot both understood hope alone was not enough. Skill, calm, timing, and a miracle. That's what they needed. And the miracle had not arrived yet. The fuel numbers kept falling. But the quiet girl from seat 14A didn't let her hands shake even once. The plane felt heavier now, as if it understood the danger too. Every small vibration, every soft rumble under the floor. She could feel it like a message. The co-pilot kept looking between her and the fuel gauge. "We're dropping too fast," he whispered. "I know," she replied softly. Passengers didn't know the details, but they felt something was wrong. A nervous silence spread through the cabin. Even the children had stopped crying. Everyone was waiting for news, for hope, for something. One attendant approached the cockpit door again. "People are asking if we're landing soon." The co-pilot opened the door halfway. "Tell them we're heading to a safe airstrip. And tell them to stay calm. No sudden movements." The attendant nodded, though her eyes showed fear. He closed the door and turned to the girl. "They're scared." She kept her eyes forward. "I know, but fear is normal, as long as they don't panic." He sighed. "You speak like someone who's dealt with emergencies before." She didn't answer. She didn't want to talk about her past. "Not yet." A soft warning tone suddenly filled the cockpit. The co-pilot's heart dropped. "That's the secondary alert. Fuel is entering danger level." She leaned forward, studying the readings. "We still have time. Not much, but enough if the wind stays on our side." Ground control contacted them again. "Flight 719, your airstrip is now 35 minutes away. Confirm fuel status." The co-pilot hesitated. He looked at her. She gave him a small nod. "Tell them the truth." He pressed the button. "Fuel estimate, uncertain. Leak progressing. Ground." Control paused, a silence that felt like a weight on her chest. Then the voice came. "Understood. We will guide you step by step." She took a slow breath. Step by step. That was all they had. She adjusted their speed again. "We go a little slower. That will help conserve." "We might lose time," the co-pilot said. "We don't need time," she replied quietly. "We need distance." He stared at her like she had just spoken a language only expert pilots knew. You've really done this before." She didn't deny it. "Focus on navigation." He nodded quickly. The plane flew on, every minute feeling longer than the last. Wind pushed gently against the wings. The sky ahead was clear. But below them was nothing but endless land and clouds, no cities, no airports, nothing that could help them. Then, suddenly, a small tremor ran through the aircraft. The co-pilot stiffened. "What was that?" She checked the readings. Her jaw tightened. "Fuel imbalance. The left tank is dropping faster." He swallowed. "Can you control it? For now." "For now?" He repeated, panic rising. She steadied her voice. "Don't think too far ahead. Think about the next 5 minutes." He forced himself to breathe. The cabin behind them grew louder. Someone began to pray softly. Someone else asked the attendant why the plane sounded different. The tension in the air was almost physical. Another message from ground control came. "Flight 7-1-9. We are adjusting your path slightly left. This reduces wind resistance." She followed the instruction instantly. The plane responded smoothly too. Smoothly for someone untrained. The co-pilot finally said what had been in his head the whole time. "You're not just a former pilot, are you?" She paused. For a moment, her past flashed in her eyes. An old crew, an old cockpit, an emergency she never forgot. "No," she whispered. He looked at her, waiting. But she didn't continue. Suddenly, a sharp, uneven sound echoed from beneath the plane. A rattling noise. Metal shifting. The co-pilot's face turned white. "Cargo again?" "No," she said softly. "Something else." The rattling grew louder. Passengers were terrified now. Someone called out, "What's happening?" A baby cried. The attendants tried their best to calm everyone, but even they looked scared. The noise settled after a few seconds, but the message was clear. The plane was weakening. The co-pilot ran a hand through his hair. Why is everything going wrong? First the captain, then pressure, then fuel, now this. She kept her eyes on the controls. Planes don't fail like this unless they're pushed. He stared at her. Pushed? By what? She didn't answer. She didn't know the answer herself. But she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense that things were happening too fast and too perfectly timed to be normal. But right now, they didn't have the luxury to figure it out. Ground control called again. Flight 719, you are 25 minutes from the airstrip. Maintain your pace. 25 minutes. They didn't have 25 minutes of fuel. The co-pilot whispered, "We won't make it, will we?" She looked at him for the first time with something like truth in her eyes. "We will," she said, "but not by staying normal." He stared at her. "What do you mean?" Her fingers tightened on the controls. "We're going to try something." "Harder," she said. "And it has to work. Because if it didn't, there would be no more chances." Asterisk. The air inside the cockpit felt heavier now. The quiet girl from seat 14A tightened her seatbelt. The co-pilot did the same, watching her like he already knew something risky was coming, but he didn't ask. He trusted her more than he understood her. She checked the readings again. The emergencies. Left tank was dropping faster. The right one wasn't far behind, and the distance to the airstrip, still 20+ minutes. Too far for a usual flight. Too far for a plane leaking fuel. Too far for anyone without a plan. "What are you thinking?" The co-pilot asked quietly. She breathed in slowly. "We reduce drag even more. Not the usual method. Something different." He blinked. "Different how?" "By using the wind instead of fighting it," she replied. He stared. "That's extremely tricky." She didn't argue. "Tricky is better than impossible." He nodded as if accepting. A truth he didn't want to hear. Outside, the sky looked calm, but inside, tension ran through every passenger like an electric pulse. People whispered prayers. Some hugged their loved ones. A young girl kept asking if they were going to be okay. Her mother kept saying yes, even though her voice shook. The quiet girl steadied the controls. "When I adjust the flaps, the plane will feel lighter for a moment. It might tilt. Passengers will panic," the co-pilot said. "They're already scared," she answered softly. "But panic won't matter if we don't survive." He swallowed hard. She radioed ground control. "We need wind data, highest tailwind direction." Ground control answered quickly. "Sending now." A small digital map flashed on their screen. She calculated in her mind. Angles, distance, airflow. She could almost feel the plane breathing. The memory of her old life returned clearly for the first time. Training sessions, emergency drills, long nights listening to instructors speak about how to fly with barely any fuel. She never thought she'd use those lessons again. The co-pilot watched her. Most licensed pilots would hesitate to do this. She didn't look at him. Most haven't had to make impossible choices. He didn't reply. He felt there was a story behind her words, something painful, something hidden, but this wasn't the moment to ask. She placed her hand on the flap lever. "When I pull this, don't touch anything. Just watch the gauges." He nodded. She took a deep breath. Then she made the adjustment. The plane dipped sharply for half a second. People in the cabin screamed. A few grabbed their armrests so tightly their knuckles turned white. The co-pilot looked at the readings. Fuel consumption slowing. She kept her hand steady. "Good, now we hold this angle." Passengers felt the plane glide smoother, softer, almost like it found a gentle path through the air. Some of them stopped screaming. Some whispered, "What happened?" Others held onto each other with silent fear. The co-pilot stared at the fuel reading. We bought a few more minutes. We need more than minutes, she said. Another small tremor ran through the aircraft. This time it came from the right side. The co-pilot's eyes widened. The right tank is draining faster now. She nodded without surprise. The leak is spreading, he panicked. That means we don't rely on fuel alone, she said calmly. He blinked. What else is there? Momentum, gravity, wind. He stared at her like she was speaking another language. You're trying to glide a commercial aircraft? Not fully, she said. Just enough to save fuel. He rubbed his forehead. This is insane. It's our only chance. The co-pilot didn't argue again. She tilted the nose very slightly upward, just a tiny gesture, one she wouldn't dare do in normal flight. The plane responded. It wasn't gliding yet, but it was moving in a way that reduced drag even more, but it also made the ride feel extremely sensitive. A few passengers felt the shift immediately. What's happening now? Why is the plane so light? Is something wrong again? Attendants tried to calm them, but fear had already spread. In the cockpit, the co-pilot's breathing grew fast. If you angle it too much, we'll lose speed. I know, she said. And if you keep it too little, we won't save enough fuel. I know. He stared at her. Then how do you know the right angle? Her voice became softer. Because I've done it before. He frowned. Way. She didn't answer. Not yet. The sky ahead grew brighter. Ground control called again. Flight 719, you are 15 minutes from the airstrip. Winds remain favorable. 15 minutes. The fuel reading said they only had around 12. The co-pilot whispered. We're still short. She looked at him, finally speaking the truth that settled like ice in the cockpit. We're not going to reach the airstrip with fuel. He froze. Then, what do we do? She looked forward at the sky as if she saw something deeper than clouds, something only she understood. We land with whatever's left, she said, even if the engines go silent. His heart dropped. You mean, yes, she whispered. We prepare for a powerless landing. A shiver ran through him. Outside, the passengers sat unaware that their entire fate now rested on a quiet girl from seat 14. A dot who was about to attempt something only a handful of pilots in the world had ever done. Asterisk, the quiet girl from seat 14, stared at the sky ahead as if it held the last thread of hope. The co-pilot kept watching her hands, her eyes, her breathing. Everything about her looked calm on the outside, but he sensed the battle happening inside her. Powerless landing. He whispered, Do you really think we can do it? She didn't look at him. We don't think, we do. He swallowed hard. But once the engines go silent, they won't go silent at once, she said softly. They'll fade. And when they fade, we hold the glide. He trembled. Gliding a plane this big is not impossible, she whispered. Just unforgiving. Behind them, passengers began to feel the strange quiet creeping through the cabin. The engines were still running, but softer, weaker. People exchanged looks. Some asked attendants why the sound was changing. Some hugged their children. Some closed their eyes. The attendants were scared too, but held themselves steady. They sensed the girl in the cockpit was doing something extraordinary. Something beyond training. Something beyond courage. Ground control spoke again. Flight 719, you are 10 minutes from the airstrip. Fuel readings? The co-pilot hesitated. She spoke instead. Low, very low. Ground control replied, We understand, clear to approach. Keep trajectory steady. She inhaled deeply. Copy. Now came the moment she feared since she took hold of the controls. She eased the throttle back even further. The engine rumble softened. Again. The co-pilot felt his heart drop. We're almost gliding. That's the point, she said calmly. The quiet girl looked at the screen showing the airstrip's direction, still far, but finally visible on radar. Her chest tightened. Memories flooded her mind. Another plane, another emergency, another landing she once tried to save. A landing that didn't go well enough. She closed her eyes for a second. Not again. She whispered inside. Not today. She opened her eyes again with new strength. Get ready, she said. When the engines lose power, the nose will dip. The co-pilot nodded slowly, gripping his seat. Suddenly, a warning light blinked. Fuel critical. The co-pilot whispered, "This is it." A second later, the left engine coughed. A strange hollow sound filled the cockpit. A few passengers screamed. The right engine sputtered. The quiet girl didn't flinch. Hold, don't touch anything." The co-pilot froze. Then the left engine faded. Silence rolled across the plane like a slow, cold wave. Passengers sat frozen. Some whispered, "Why is it so quiet?" Others covered their mouths with shaking hands. A baby cried softly until its mother held it close, whispering prayers. The right engine weakened, then faded too. And suddenly, the entire aircraft was gliding in the air. No roar. No push. Just the wind. The co-pilot whispered, "We're floating." Her voice came out steady. "We're gliding." "That's different." She adjusted the nose, balancing the aircraft with tiny movements. Her hands were so calm that the co-pilot wondered how a human could stay so steady in a moment like this. Outside the windows, the world looked peaceful, unfairly peaceful, like it didn't know a plane was fighting gravity with its last breath. The quiet girl looked ahead. "The airstrip, I see it." The co-pilot leaned forward. "I see it too. It will be fast," she said. "We won't have time for a perfect line. But we don't need perfect. We need safe." Passengers braced. Attendants shouted instructions. Heads down, stay down. Their voices shaking despite their training. Wind brushed hard against the wings as the ground rose closer. The co-pilot whispered, "Too fast." "Too fast." "No," she said, "just enough." She lifted the nose slightly. Not too much, not too little. Just right. The runway rushed toward them. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. The wheels hit the ground. A loud jolt. The plane bounced. Passengers screamed, "Hold!" She shouted. The co-pilot grabbed the brake control. She guided his hand. "Now, gentle." The brakes caught. The plane skidded. Metal groaned. Luggage crashed inside overhead bins. The aircraft slid forward. Slowing, slowing, slowing. And finally, it stopped. Silence. The kind of silence where people forget how to breathe. Then the first cry came, from a passenger in the back. Then another. Then someone shouted, "We're alive." The cabin burst with sobs, laughter, prayers. Disbelief. Attendants hugged each other. Strangers held each other's hands. Some people broke down in tears. The co-pilot looked at her with eyes full of shock and gratitude. You saved all of us." She stared at the runway ahead, breathing slowly, letting the weight finally lift from her shoulders. "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." The cabin door opened. Fresh air rushed in. Sunlight filled the aisle. The quiet girl from seat 14I stood up to leave. People tried to thank her, but she only gave them a small, humble nod. No pride, no attention, no story. Just a quiet girl, walking down the stairs of a plane she brought back from the sky. Like she had done it 100 times in another life, and before anyone could ask her name, she disappeared into the crowd.